My name is Katharina Winters, 29 years old, and I'm staring at the heart monitor next to my hospital bed as it beeps steadily. 3 days ago, I was in a devastating car crash that landed me in the ICU. During those critical hours, I called my parents 17 times. They never picked up because my sister Ashley was having an emotional breakdown over paint swatches for her apartment. That neglect was the final straw in a lifetime pattern. So I had my lawyer visit me here, and when my parents finally arrived, they learned exactly what their priorities had cost them. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, and hit that subscribe button to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being invisible in my own family. I grew up in Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most prestigious neighborhoods. From the outside, we had it all: a beautiful brownstone, successful parents, and private school educations. My mother, Diana Winters, ran a high-end interior design firm catering to Boston's elite, while my father, Thomas Winters, was a renowned cardiovascular surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital. They were the perfect power couple admired throughout our social circle for their achievements, taste, and seemingly perfect family. I was their first child, planned and initially cherished. In family photos from my early years, I see glimpses of genuine affection before everything changed. When I was 5 years old, my sister Ashley was born, and it was as if a switch flipped in our family dynamic. She arrived with a full head of blonde curls and bright blue eyes that perfectly matched my mother's, while I had inherited my father's darker features. It might sound trivial, but that physical resemblance seemed to create an immediate bond that I would never share. The shift wasn't subtle. By Ashley's first birthday, the pattern was clear. When I developed a severe case of strep throat during her party, I was sent to stay with our housekeeper in the kitchen while the celebration continued without interruption. "We can't disappoint all these people who came to see Ashley," my mother explained as she handed me off, not even checking my fever before returning to the guests. As we grew, the incidents piled up. When I was 8, I had a severe asthma attack during Ashley's first ballet recital. Instead of taking me to the emergency room immediately, my parents insisted on watching her complete her 2-minute routine while I struggled to breathe in the audience. It was my teacher, Mrs. Callahan, who finally intervened, practically demanding they seek medical help. Later, they explained they didn't want to make a scene and thought I was just nervous about the crowd. Academic achievements became another battleground. I was a natural student, consistently earning top marks with minimal effort. By 4th grade, I was reading at a high school level and showing particular aptitude for science and mathematics. My report cards filled with A's were met with distracted nods and quick "good jobs" before conversation inevitably turned to Ashley's struggles. Her C+ in art class warranted family discussions and special rewards for trying her best, while my science fair victories were barely acknowledged. Not everyone needs constant praise for doing what's expected. My father once told me when I asked why they hadn't attended my academic award ceremony. That same week, they rearranged their work schedules to attend Ashley's soccer game, where she mostly sat on the bench. Family trips became exercises in catering to Ashley's every whim. When I was 12, we had planned a weekend in New York City to visit museums that I had been researching for months. The morning of our departure, Ashley announced she didn't feel like going to boring old buildings. Within an hour, our itinerary completely changed to shopping and visiting the toy stores she preferred. My carefully prepared list of exhibits was tossed aside without discussion. Through necessity, I became self-reliant. I learned to forge permission slips, arrange my own transportation, and manage my schedule without parental input. By 13, I was essentially raising myself while my parents poured their energy into managing Ashley's increasingly dramatic emotional needs. The only person who saw me clearly was my paternal grandfather, Edward Winters. A self-made businessman who had built a small manufacturing company into a regional success, Grandpa Edward recognized what was happening in our family dynamics. "They're making a terrible mistake with you, Kat," he told me during one of our special Saturday lunches when I was 14. Some people can't see the value of what comes easily, so they chase what's difficult instead. But I see you, and what I see is extraordinary. Those Saturday lunches became my sanctuary. Grandpa would pick me up in his vintage Cadillac and take me to the small diner he'd frequented for decades. There, over blueberry pancakes and endless cups of coffee-hot chocolate for me until I was 16, he taught me about investments, business, ethics, and the importance of financial independence. Never tie your self-worth to other people's approval, he advised. Build something of your own that no one can take away. The contrast between these wisdom-filled afternoons and my home life became increasingly stark. When I was 16, I won a prestigious national science competition with a project on biodegradable polymers. The award included a $10,000 scholarship and recognition at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. My parents initially agreed to attend, but the day before our scheduled departure, Ashley had a meltdown about her upcoming shopping trip with friends being delayed. Within hours, my mother informed me they wouldn't be able to make the ceremony after all. Ashley is really struggling right now, and we can't leave her in this state, she explained while Ashley smirked behind her. You'll be fine on your own. You always are. I attended the ceremony alone, accepting my award in front of an audience of proud parents and accomplished scientists. When the announcer called for my family to join me on stage, the empty seats in the reserved section seemed to announce to everyone exactly where I stood in my family's priorities. My project mentor, Dr. Abernathy from the local university lab where I volunteered, stepped in instead, standing beside me with genuine pride. Ashley's behavior grew increasingly manipulative as she entered her teen years. She learned exactly how to trigger my parents' protective instincts, developing a pattern of creating crises that required their immediate intervention, particularly whenever attention might otherwise fall on me. These weren't just normal teenage dramatics, but calculated performances. I once overheard her on the phone with a friend laughing about how easily she could get the parents to drop everything with the right combination of tears and accusations. Despite the challenges, I remained determined to create my own path. I channeled my energy into academic excellence laboratory research and planning my escape to college. Grandpa Edward's lessons about self-reliance became my guiding principles. I didn't need my parents' attention to succeed. I just needed to stay focused on building my own future. My acceptance to Northwestern University with a full scholarship for biomedical engineering should have been a moment of family pride. Instead, it became another footnote in the Ashley Chronicles. The day my acceptance package arrived, Ashley announced she'd been invited to a party with the popular seniors, completely overshadowing my news. My parents spent the evening helping her shop for the perfect outfit, while my achievement gathered dust on the kitchen counter. Northwestern is fine, I suppose, my father finally commented 3 days later. Though I always imagined you at Harvard or Yale. This from the man who hadn't bothered to review any of my college applications or show interest in my career aspirations. Moving to Chicago was my first taste of real freedom. My dormitory room, small and basic as it was, became the first space that was truly mine. My roommate, Zoe Patterson, was everything I could have hoped for an intelligent, vibrant photography major with a wicked sense of humor and zero tolerance for pretension. Your family sounds like they're from another planet, she remarked, after witnessing one of my obligatory phone calls home where my mother spent 15 minutes detailing Ashley's college visit weekend without asking a single question about my life. Who ignores their kid getting a prestigious fellowship to talk about their other kids' party plans? Through Zoe, I built my first real support network. Her circle of friends welcomed me without hesitation, creating weekend plans, study groups, and holiday celebrations that showed me what genuine relationships felt like. For the first time, I experienced what it meant to be valued simply for being myself without having to achieve or compete for basic acknowledgement. In my sophomore year, I caught the attention of Professor Elena Martinez, the department's rising star in medical device innovation. After reviewing my lab work, she invited me to join her research team, an opportunity usually reserved for graduate students. You have an exceptional mind, Katharina, she told me, pronouncing my full name with care, unlike my family who had always shortened it regardless of my preference. More importantly, you see connections others miss. I'd be delighted to mentor you. Under Professor Martinez's guidance, I flourished. Our work on minimally invasive diagnostic tools began attracting attention from medical technology companies before I'd even completed my junior year. Meanwhile, my grandfather continued his long-distance support, calling weekly and visiting whenever his health permitted. During my second year, Grandpa Edward surprised me by revealing he had established a trust fund for me that would mature when I turned 25 or completed graduate studies, whichever came later. Your parents don't know about this arrangement, he confided during a weekend visit. I've watched how they manage family resources, and I want to ensure you have your own foundation. This is between us. His foresight would prove invaluable, especially as family tensions escalated. Holiday visits became increasingly difficult to navigate. Each break brought fresh examples of the imbalance in our family. During winter break of my junior year, I arrived home to find my childhood bedroom had been converted into an inspiration studio for Ashley's latest hobby, interior design. My belongings had been boxed and moved to the much smaller guest room without consultation. Ashley needs proper space for her creative process, my mother explained when I expressed surprise. Besides, you're hardly ever here. That same break, Ashley casually asked to borrow $2,000 for a spring break trip with friends. When I declined, explaining that I was saving for graduate school applications, a family argument erupted that ended with my father suggesting I was selfish and not a team player. Family supports family, he lectured, while Ashley smugly watched from the doorway. Your sister would help you if you needed it. When have I ever asked for anything? I countered, years of frustration bubbling over. I've been solving my own problems since I was a child because you two were always too busy with Ashley's crises. The ensuing silence was deafening. For a moment, I thought perhaps they would recognize the truth. Instead, my mother simply sighed dramatically. You've always been so independent, Katharina. We've respected that about you. Ashley just needs more guidance. I returned to Northwestern early, cutting my break short, and promising myself I would limit future visits. My graduation ceremony became another exercise in family dynamics. Despite achieving honors and receiving a prestigious innovation award, my parents attended only the main ceremony before leaving early for Ashley's small art exhibition at her much less rigorous state college. They didn't even stay long enough to meet Professor Martinez or see me receive my departmental honors. Grandpa Edward, despite his declining health, made the trip and sat proudly in the front row of the departmental ceremony. Seeing his face beam with genuine pride somewhat softened the sting of my parents' absence. It would be the last time we would celebrate together. 3 months after my graduation, Grandpa Edward passed away peacefully in his sleep. His death devastated me in ways I couldn't fully process, removing the one family member who had truly seen and valued me. At his funeral, my grief was compounded by my parents' behavior, as they spent much of the reception comforting Ashley, who had met him perhaps 5 times in her life, but was putting on a dramatic display of sorrow. The final surprise from my grandfather came through his attorney. He had left the majority of his estate to me, including his controlling interest in his company. My parents were shocked and immediately consulted their lawyers about contesting the will, claiming I had unduly influenced my grandfather. Their challenge failed when the attorney produced years of documentation showing Grandpa's clear intentions and sound mind. This attempted financial manipulation became the final catalyst for my decision to limit contact with my family to the bare minimum necessary. I moved forward with building my own life, determined to honor my grandfather's legacy and belief in me. With seed money from my grandfather's inheritance and the connections I'd built through Professor Martinez, I launched my first biomedical research venture at 24. Working from a small laboratory space in Chicago's emerging innovation district, I assembled a team of brilliant minds who shared my vision for revolutionizing minimally invasive diagnostic tools. Our initial focus was developing microscale sensors that could detect early markers of degenerative diseases years before symptoms appeared. Those early startup days were exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. 18-hour workdays merged into weekends as we raced to develop working prototypes before our initial funding ran out. Through it all, my core team became a kind of family, bound by shared purpose and mutual respect that I'd never experienced in my actual home. Jeremy, our biomedical engineer, with 3 previous patents to his name, often stayed late helping me troubleshoot design challenges. Aisha, our brilliant software developer, created algorithms that could interpret the subtle signals our sensors detected. Marcus, with his background in medical ethics and regulatory affairs, navigated the complex approval processes that would eventually bring our work to patients. Together, we built something that mattered, celebrating small victories and supporting each other through inevitable setbacks. Within 18 months, our persistence paid off when our prototype caught the attention of several major medical technology investors. After careful consideration, we accepted funding from Horizon Medical Ventures, maintaining majority control while gaining the capital needed to expand our operations. By my 27th birthday, Winter Diagnostic Systems employed 32 people and had 2 products in clinical trials. Throughout this period of professional growth, my contact with my family remained minimal and strictly controlled. Monthly phone calls lasting exactly 30 minutes provided enough connection to alleviate guilt without allowing the old patterns to reassert themselves. These calls invariably followed the same script, my brief updates being acknowledged perfunctorily before conversation turned to Ashley's latest drama. "That's nice about your patent application, Katharina," my mother would say before immediately pivoting. "Did I tell you about Ashley's new opportunity? She's thinking about starting a lifestyle blog. We're helping her set up a home studio for the photography." I declined holidays with the family, opting instead for adventures with Zoe and our expanding circle of friends. We hiked Machu Picchu one Christmas, spent Thanksgiving, volunteering at community centers, and created our own traditions that were free from the emotional manipulation I'd grown up with. I sent appropriate gifts on birthdays and holidays, always accompanied by brief, pleasant cards that revealed nothing meaningful about my life or feelings. My parents attempted to breach these boundaries regularly, often using guilt as their weapon of choice. "Family should be together," my father would insist, conveniently forgetting the countless times they had chosen Ashley over me. "You're becoming so distant and cold." What they really meant, I suspected, was that I was becoming less useful. Without access to my growing success and resources, I served little purpose in their family system. As Ashley's pattern of failed ventures continued, their not-so-subtle hints about family support increased. Ashley's life continued along its predictable path of dramatically announced passions that quickly fizzled when they required actual effort. She cycled through 3 different college majors before graduating with a general studies degree after 6 years. A series of toxic relationships consumed family resources as my parents repeatedly helped her relocate, paid off debts accumulated with unsuitable partners, and provided emotional support through tearful breakups. Her professional endeavors followed a similar pattern. There was the jewelry-making business that collapsed after 3 months, the dog-walking service that ended when she found it too early to get up, and the social media consulting agency that never acquired a single client. Each failure was met with parental support, both financial and emotional, along with ready excuses about circumstances beyond her control. Her most recent obsession, when I last spoke with my parents, was interior design, inspired apparently by her experience selecting furnishings for her newest apartment. Her 5th in 3 years, each move funded by my parents. She had convinced them to finance her certification through an expensive but non-accredited online program, followed by a complete home studio setup with professional-grade equipment. "She has such an eye for color and texture," my mother gushed during our monthly call. She's going to revolutionize apartment styling for young professionals. I made appropriate, encouraging noises while mentally calculating how long this venture would last. Based on previous patterns, 3 to 4 months seemed the likely time frame before some insurmountable obstacle would arise. Meanwhile, my own company was preparing to announce a major breakthrough in our diagnostic technology. After years of research, we had developed a blood test that could detect markers for 5 different autoimmune conditions up to 18 months before clinical symptoms appeared. Early detection meant earlier intervention, potentially changing treatment outcomes for millions of patients. The medical community was beginning to take serious notice, and several major healthcare systems were negotiating pilot programs. When I mentioned this development briefly during our monthly call, my father responded with a distracted, "That's interesting. Hey, did your mother tell you Ashley's considering buying a small design studio? We might need to help with the down payment." The disparity couldn't have been clearer. My legitimate business accomplishment that could impact global healthcare was worthy of a 5-second acknowledgement, while Ashley's latest impulsive idea warranted financial planning and family discussion. Outside my biological family, I continued building meaningful connections. Zoe remained my closest friend even after her move to Denver for a prestigious photography position. We spoke weekly and visited each other quarterly, maintaining the bond that had sustained me through college. My team at Winter Diagnostic had become a second family, celebrating birthdays, supporting each other through life events, and building something meaningful together. One particularly telling incident occurred at Zoe's wedding the previous year. As her maid of honor, I had spent months helping plan the perfect celebration. During the reception, just before I was scheduled to give my speech, my phone rang with my parents' ringtone. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Katharina, thank goodness you picked up." My mother's voice was tight with that familiar, urgent tone that always signaled an Ashley emergency. "You need to call your sister immediately. Justin broke up with her and she's absolutely devastated. She's locked herself in the bathroom and won't talk to anyone but you." Justin was boyfriend number 4 or 5 in the past 2 years, a relationship I'd heard about only in passing. The request was so absurd given the circumstances that I almost laughed. "Mom, I'm at Zoe's wedding. I'm literally about to give the maid of honor speech in 5 minutes. I can't call Ashley right now." "This is an emergency, Katharina," she hissed. "Your sister needs you. Surely your friend would understand." The casual dismissal of one of the most important days in my best friend's life as something that could be interrupted for Ashley's latest romantic drama crystallized everything wrong with my family's expectations. I declined politely but firmly finished the call and gave my speech as planned. The incident strengthened my resolve to maintain emotional distance from the toxic patterns that had defined my childhood. Despite these boundaries, frustration sometimes bubbled to the surface, particularly when I allowed myself to imagine how different things might have been with parents who took pride in my achievements or showed interest in my life. I channeled these feelings into therapy, working with Dr. Sarah Patel to process the complicated grief of having living parents who had never really seen me. "You've done remarkably well creating a life of purpose and connection, despite the emotional neglect you experienced," Dr. Patel observed during one session. "The challenge now isn't about winning their approval, which may never come, but about deciding what kind of relationship is healthy for you to maintain going forward." These words would prove prophetic in the wake of what happened next when a life-threatening emergency forced everything into crystal-clear perspective. The day that changed everything began ordinarily enough. I had spent the afternoon in a promising meeting with representatives from Mayo Clinic about implementing our diagnostic platform in their research division. The discussion had gone exceptionally well, with their team expressing genuine enthusiasm about potential collaboration. As the Chicago skyline glowed with early evening light, I headed home in light rain, mentally drafting follow-up emails and planning next steps. I remember checking the time, 7:36, and thinking I might actually get home at a reasonable hour for once. The traffic light ahead turned green, and I accelerated through the intersection. What happened next came in fragmented flashes of sensation and sound. Headlights suddenly blinding me from the left side, the screech of tires on wet pavement, my instinctive jerk of the steering wheel and slam of brakes, the sickening crunch of metal and shattered glass, the bizarre sensation of weightlessness as my car rolled once-twice, coming to rest upside down. Pain bloomed everywhere at once, but most intensely in my chest and left leg. Warm liquid trickled down my face, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The world seemed distant sounds muffled as though coming through water. Through the cracked windshield, rain mixed with gasoline created psychedelic patterns in the gathering darkness. "Don't move! Help is coming!" The voice came from somewhere outside. A face appeared, a stranger's concerned expression barely visible through the spiderweb of broken glass. "The fire department is on the way. Just stay with me, okay?" Time became elastic, stretching and contracting in strange ways. I remember trying to reach my phone in the center console, hanging upside down from my seatbelt, the pressure making breathing increasingly difficult. The same stranger's voice returned closer now. "We need to get you out. There's fuel leaking. Can you unbuckle your seatbelt if I support you?" Working together with the Good Samaritan, a middle-aged man whose name I would never learn, I managed to release the seatbelt and crawl through the shattered driver's window. The movement sent waves of agonizing pain through my body, and I knew immediately that something was very wrong internally. "The other driver," I gasped as the man helped me to a safe distance. "Is he?" "Paramedics are with him," the man assured me, his jacket now draped over my shoulders. "He swerved into your lane. I saw the whole thing. Looked like he was drunk or texting." The next moments blurred as emergency vehicles arrived, their lights painting the wet street in alternating red and blue. Paramedics stabilized my neck, checked vital signs, and loaded me into an ambulance. As we pulled away, I saw flames engulfing my car, the vehicle I'd purchased to celebrate our company's first major contract, now reduced to a burning shell. In the ambulance, the extent of my injuries became clearer as the emergency medical technicians worked efficiently around me. Multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding, head trauma. Through waves of pain and growing shock, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. I needed to contact someone. Not my team, not yet. First, family. Despite everything, some deeply ingrained instinct told me to call my parents. "Can I use a phone?" I asked the EMT monitoring my vital signs. "My family needs to know." "We'll be at the hospital in about 2 minutes. She replied efficiently, adjusting an IV. "The trauma team will contact your family once you're stabilized." Those 2 minutes stretched eternally as I drifted between sharp clarity and foggy confusion. The ambulance doors opened to a flurry of activity, medical personnel swarming around the gurney as I was wheeled rapidly through bright fluorescent corridors. 29-year-old female MVA with rollover, possible internal bleeding, multiple fractures responding to stimuli but BP dropping. The trauma bay was organized chaos. A doctor leaned over me, her eyes kind but focused above her mask. "Ms. Winters, I'm Dr. Reeves. You've been in a serious accident. We need to take you to surgery immediately to address some internal bleeding. Is there someone we should contact for you?" "My parents." I managed reciting their number as a nurse wrote it down. "Tell them it's urgent. Tell them I'm going into surgery." "Of course," the nurse assured me. "I'll call them right away." As the pre-surgical team prepared me, I heard the nurse's voice from somewhere nearby. "Yes, this is Mercy Hospital calling for Diana or Thomas Winters. I'm calling about your daughter, Katharina. She's been in a serious car accident and is heading into emergency surgery for internal bleeding." A pause, and then, "I understand, but this is quite serious. She specifically asked us to call you before surgery. Could you possibly—" "I see. Well, if you could call back as soon as possible, the number is—" The conversation faded as I was moved again, but the nurse's tone had told me everything I needed to know. They weren't coming. Not immediately. My sister's needs, whatever they were, had once again taken precedence. As the anesthesia began taking effect, A strange calm settled over me. Perhaps it was the drugs, or perhaps it was the final confirmation of what I had always known, but tried to deny. In a moment of genuine life or death crisis, I was still not the priority. "We'll take good care of you," the anesthesiologist promised as consciousness began slipping away. I nodded, slightly too weak to speak, and surrendered to the darkness. I later learned that my surgery lasted nearly 5 hours. A ruptured spleen-liver laceration, collapsed lung, and multiple fractures required extensive intervention. I woke disoriented in the intensive care unit surrounded by beeping monitors and the hiss of oxygen. A kind-faced nurse noticed my consciousness and approached immediately. "Welcome back, Ms. Winters. I'm Darlene. You're in the ICU at Mercy Hospital. The surgery went well, but you've got some healing to do." "My parents," I whispered through parched lips. Darlene's expression told me everything before she spoke. "We've left several messages. No response yet. Is there someone else we could call for you?" The disappointment felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else. "My phone. Can you help me make some calls?" With Darlene's assistance, I made 3 more attempts to reach my parents, all going straight to voicemail. On the 4th try, I left a detailed message. "Mom, Dad, I'm in the ICU at Mercy Hospital after a car accident. I've just come out of emergency surgery for internal bleeding. The doctors are saying it was very serious. Please call the hospital as soon as you get this." My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, too calm for the circumstances. Perhaps it was the lingering effects of anesthesia, or perhaps it was the culmination of years of lowered expectations. Next, I asked Darlene to help me call Zoe. Despite the late hour, she answered on the 2nd ring, and her immediate response upon hearing the news brought tears to my eyes. "I'm booking a flight right now," she said without hesitation. "I'll be there by morning. What do you need me to bring?" The contrast between her instant mobilization and my parents' silence spoke volumes. Complications arose the following day, necessitating a second procedure to address unexpected bleeding. Before going back to surgery, I made one final attempt to reach my parents, this time getting through to their answering machine. I left another urgent message explaining the situation clearly. Emerging from the second surgery, I was weaker but stable. Darlene had stayed past her shift to check on me, becoming a steadfast presence during those critical hours. She helped me try my parents once more, this time reaching my sister's voicemail. "Ashley, it's Kat. I'm in the ICU at Mercy Hospital after a serious accident. I've had 2 surgeries. Please have Mom and Dad call me. It's important. The doctors need family medical history, and there are decisions to be made." The response came 3 hours later, not from my parents, but from Ashley herself. A text message that read simply, "Dealing with a paint crisis for my new studio. Can't talk now. Will tell parents to call when they're free. They're helping me with the color scheme emergency. Hope you feel better soon. A paint crisis." While I lay in intensive care with tubes and monitors keeping me alive, my family was occupied with my sister's decorating emergency. The absurdity might have been laughable if it hadn't so perfectly encapsulated our entire family dynamic. Zoe arrived early the next morning, her face drawn with worry that transformed to shock when she saw my condition. Unlike my family, she had taken my emergency at face value, dropping everything to be by my side. "Oh my God, Kat," she whispered carefully, taking my hand between the IV lines. "You could have—" She didn't finish the sentence, but I saw in her eyes the recognition of how close it had been. "Have my parents called?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No one's called," the day nurse confirmed. "Would you like me to try again?" I stared at the ceiling, something crystallizing within me with perfect clarity. 3 days had passed since my accident, 3 days of surgeries, pain, and uncertainty, during which my family had been informed repeatedly of the seriousness of my condition. Their absence wasn't an oversight or a misunderstanding. It was a choice consistent with every other choice they had made throughout my life. "No," I said finally. "No more calls to my parents, but I'd like to make a different call. I need to speak with my lawyer. Michael Chen, legal counsel for Winter Diagnostic Systems, arrived at the hospital within 2 hours of my call, his normally immaculate appearance slightly rumpled from his hasty departure from a weekend family gathering. He carried a sleek leather portfolio and wore an expression of grave concern as he was shown to my ICU room. "Katharina," he said, taking in the medical equipment surrounding me with visible shock. "When your assistant said you were in the ICU, I had no idea it was this serious." "Car accident," I explained, my voice still weak from the breathing tube that had been removed only hours earlier. "Drunk driver crossed the center line Thursday night. 2 surgeries so far." Michael set his portfolio on the adjustable table and pulled a chair close to my bedside, his professional demeanor momentarily replaced by genuine concern. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. Is there anything you need? Anything I can do to help?" Zoe, who had stepped out to give us privacy, returned with coffee for Michael and ice chips for me. The simple thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes, highlighting the contrast between the friends who showed up without hesitation and the family who couldn't be bothered to return a call. "I need to make some changes," I said after gathering myself. "Legal changes. Today." Michael nodded immediately, shifting into professional mode. "What kind of changes are you considering?" "Everything," I replied, the decision feeling more right with every passing moment. "Medical proxy power of attorney, will company succession plan, all of it. I want my parents removed from every legal document that currently includes them." If Michael was surprised by the request, he hit it well. "I can certainly help with that. May I ask what prompted this decision now?" I gestured weakly at the hospital room around us. 3 days. I've been here for 3 days, had 2 emergency surgeries, and my parents haven't bothered to return a single call because my sister is having a crisis over paint colors." Michael's expression shifted subtly, a flash of something like anger crossing his features before he composed himself. "I see. That certainly provides context." For the next hour, Michael and I discussed the specific changes I wanted to implement. Zoe would replace my parents as my medical proxy with authority to make healthcare decisions if I became incapacitated. My power of attorney would be transferred to Michael himself with clear guidelines for managing my affairs. My will would be updated to remove my parents as beneficiaries, redirecting those assets to medical research foundations and education initiatives I supported. Most significantly, I decided to restructure my company ownership, creating additional protections against any future claims my family might attempt to make on my assets or intellectual property. The detailed provisions included language specifically addressing attempts to claim financial support based on family obligation. Throughout our discussion, Michael took careful notes, occasionally offering legal insights or suggesting additional provisions to consider. When we had covered everything, he looked up from his notes with a serious expression. "Katharina, I want to be certain you're making these decisions with full clarity. Your medical condition and the medications you're receiving could potentially affect your judgment. I need to ensure these changes reflect your genuine wishes, not just an emotional response to current circumstances." I appreciated his caution even as I felt complete certainty about my choices. "These aren't impulsive decisions, Michael. They're based on a lifelong pattern that this emergency has simply brought into sharper focus, but I understand your concern." We arranged for the hospital's patient advocate to serve as an independent witness to my competence and for Michael to return the following day with properly drafted documents. Before leaving, Michael hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Katharina, I think you're making a reasonable decision based on the situation you've described. Family relationships should be reciprocal. When they're consistently one-sided, it's appropriate to establish boundaries, even legal ones." After he left, Zoe returned to sit beside my bed. The weight of the decisions I'd just made settled around me, bringing not regret, but a strange sense of lightness, as though I'd finally put down a burden I'd been carrying for decades. "Are you sure about all this?" Zoe asked gently, not questioning my choice, but offering space to process it. "I'm sure. I replied, watching the steady rhythm of my heart monitor. It should have happened years ago. I just needed the final proof that they would never change. Later that evening, as Zoe dozed in the visitor's chair beside me, my phone lit up with my parents' caller ID. 72 hours after my first emergency call to them, they had finally decided to respond. I let it ring through to voicemail, curious what explanation they would offer. My mother's voice came through the speaker moments later, sounding irritated rather than concerned. "Katharina, we just saw all these missed calls from you in the hospital. I wish you'd mentioned how serious it was. We've been completely overwhelmed helping Ashley with her studio crisis. The painter mixed the wrong shade of ecru for her accent wall, and you know how sensitive she is about her design vision. We'll try to visit sometime tomorrow if Ashley's color situation gets resolved. Call us back when you can." Not a single question about my condition. No acknowledgement of the emergency surgeries mentioned in my messages. Just annoyance at the interruption and a conditional promise to visit if my sister's paint drama was resolved. The sheer absurdity of it confirmed everything I already knew. When my phone rang again 20 minutes later, it was Ashley herself. I answered this time, curious what she would say. "Kat, Mom said you're in the hospital or something. What happened?" "Car accident," I replied simply. "I've had 2 surgeries for internal bleeding." "Oh, wow, that sounds serious," she said, her tone suggesting mild interest rather than concern. "Are you going to be okay? Because I really need Mom and Dad focused right now. This paint disaster could ruin my entire design concept, and I have potential clients coming next week." I closed my eyes, finding a strange sense of peace in the absolute confirmation of where I stood in my family's priorities. "I'm sure it will all work out, Ashley. Don't worry about visiting. I've got everything handled here." "Oh, good," she replied, audible relief in her voice. "Because Mom was talking about coming to see you tomorrow, but I really need her expertise with this color crisis. I mean, this is my career starting, you know. A hospital visit can wait, right?" "Right," I agreed quietly. "A hospital visit can wait." After ending the call, I turned to find Zoe awake and watching me with a mixture of disbelief and anger on my behalf. "Did she seriously just overpaint colors?" she asked, incredulous. "She did," I confirmed. "And honestly, it's the clearest answer I could have received. Tomorrow when Michael returns, I'll sign those papers with absolute certainty." The next morning, true to his word, Michael arrived with meticulously prepared documents reflecting all the changes we had discussed. The hospital provided an independent witness to verify my competence and voluntary decision-making, and within an hour, the legal restructuring of my personal and professional life was complete. "These changes are effective immediately," Michael confirmed as he gathered the signed documents. "I'll file everything today. Is there anything else you need?" "Just one thing," I replied. "When my parents finally show up and there's no guarantee they will let them know what I've done. They should understand that actions and choices have consequences." Michael nodded, a hint of admiration in his expression. "I'll handle it personally." As he left, the weight that had pressed on me for years seemed to lift further, replaced by a calm certainty that I had finally taken the necessary steps to protect myself from a lifetime of emotional neglect. 3 days after signing the legal documents, I was moved from intensive care to a private room, marking a significant improvement in my condition. Though recovery would be lengthy, the immediate danger had passed, and my medical team expressed cautious optimism about my progress. Zoe had rearranged her work schedule to stay in Chicago through the weekend, and several of my colleagues had visited, bringing thoughtful gifts and genuine concern rather than obligation. I was reviewing some light work correspondence on my tablet when my hospital room door swung open without a knock. My mother swept in first, dressed in an outfit more suited to a charity luncheon than a hospital visit, followed by my father in a crisp button-down and slacks. Ashley trailed behind them, visibly annoyed at being there, tapping away on her phone. The contrast between their formal, almost performative appearance and Zoe's comfortable, practical presence beside my bed couldn't have been more striking. "Katharina!" my mother exclaimed with theatrical concern, as though arriving for a scheduled social call rather than 6 days late to an emergency. "You poor thing, we came as soon as we could." My father approached the bed, his clinical gaze assessing the various machines and tubes. "Looks like they've got you stabilized. What's the prognosis?" Neither of them opened with an apology or explanation for their delayed response. Neither asked how I was feeling or acknowledged the severity of what had happened. Their behavior was entirely consistent with our established pattern, yet seeing it play out in this context still managed to surprise me. "Ruptured spleen, liver laceration, collapsed lung, multiple fractures," I recited flatly. "2 emergency surgeries. I could have died." "Well, you didn't," Ashley interjected from behind them, not looking up from her phone. "And we had to rush here before the second coat of paint was even dry. Do you have any idea how that affects curing time?" A strange silence fell over the room, as even my parents seemed to recognize the inappropriate nature of her comment. Zoe, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up with barely contained anger. "I'm going to get some coffee," she announced, giving my hand a supportive squeeze. "Text if you need me to come back sooner." As Zoe left, my mother turned her attention to the room, frowning at the flowers and cards that had accumulated from friends and colleagues. "The hospital called so many times we thought something terrible had happened. You know how these places exaggerate, and those messages you left made it sound so urgent." "It was urgent, Mom," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "It still is, but you're 6 days late to the emergency." "Now, Katharina," my father began in his familiar, patronizing tone. "You know we would have come immediately if we'd understood the severity. Your mother had her hands full with Ashley's design emergency, and you've always been so independent." "Independent isn't the same as unwanted," I said quietly, the truth of our family dynamic never clearer than in this moment. My mother began fussing with my pillows, a transparent attempt to appear nurturing now that they had finally arrived. "Don't be dramatic. We're here now, aren't we? Your father will consult with the doctors and make sure you're getting proper care." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "My medical team is excellent, and they've been consulting with my authorized medical proxy for days." "Medical proxy?" My father's eyebrows shot up. "What are you talking about? I'm your next of kin." Before I could respond, the door opened again, and Michael entered, his timing impeccable as always. He carried a slim briefcase and wore his most professional expression. "Excuse the interruption," he said formally. "I saw that the Winters family had finally arrived and thought I should introduce myself." My mother turned, clearly confused by the presence of a suit-wearing stranger in my hospital room. "And you are?" "Michael Chen, General Counsel for Winter Diagnostic Systems and Ms. Winter's personal attorney," he replied, extending his hand, which my father automatically shook out of ingrained social custom. "I've been handling some important legal matters for Katharina during her hospitalization." "Legal matters?" My father's confusion was shifting rapidly toward concern. "What legal matters?" Michael looked to me for permission to continue, which I granted with a slight nod. "Given the circumstances of Ms. Winter's accident and the lack of family response during a life-threatening emergency, she has made several significant legal changes to protect herself going forward." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. My mother's performative nurturing stopped mid-pillow fluff, and my father's expression hardened into the defensive look I knew well from childhood confrontations. "What kind of changes?" he demanded, doctor's authority creeping into his voice. Michael opened his briefcase and removed a folder. "As of 3 days ago, Katharina has removed both of you as her medical proxies, replacing you with Zoe Patterson, who has been here continuously since the accident. She has also removed you from her advance directives power of attorney and will." "She can't do that," my mother interrupted, color rising in her cheeks. "We're her parents." "I assure you she can and has Michael continued smoothly. Additionally, she has restructured her company ownership to prevent any future claims against her assets based on family relationship. All documents have been properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the appropriate authorities. Ashley, finally looking up from her phone, snorted dismissively. Is this some kind of attention-seeking drama because we were busy with my studio launch? Michael turned to her with cool professionalism. Ms. Winters, I understand you've been preoccupied with paint colors while your sister was fighting for her life. I should inform you that the changes to Katharina's will specifically exclude you as well, directing her considerable assets instead to medical research and education initiatives. Considerable assets. My father's attention sharpened, his priorities suddenly crystal clear. What exactly are we talking about? Michael glanced at me again, and I gave a small nod. The truth would come out eventually, and perhaps it was better this way. Winter Diagnostic Systems recently closed a major acquisition deal with Horizon Health Innovations. The company valuation exceeded $300 million, with Katharina retaining controlling interest. Additionally, there's her personal investment portfolio and real estate holdings. The room went completely silent. My parents stared at me as though seeing me for the first time, not as their self-sufficient, easily ignored older daughter, but as someone of substantial means and influence. The realization of what they had potentially lost through their neglect dawned on their faces with almost comical clarity. There must be some mistake, my mother finally stammered. Katharina, surely you wouldn't cut off your family over one missed hospital visit. One missed visit? I repeated, the accumulated weight of a lifetime of similar incidents behind my words. I called you 17 times over 3 days. The hospital called repeatedly. I left messages explicitly stating I was in critical condition following emergency surgery, and you couldn't be bothered to even return a call because Ashley was having a paint crisis. That's not fair, Ashley interjected, suddenly engaged now that money had been mentioned. My design business is just starting. That studio has to be perfect. Your design business, I echoed. After the jewelry making, the dog walking, the social media consulting, and whatever else you've abandoned when it required actual effort. How much have Mom and Dad invested in your failed ventures over the years while expecting me to handle everything on my own? My father tried a different approach, his tone shifting to the reasonable voice he used with difficult patience. Katharina, you're on pain medication and have been through a trauma. These kinds of major decisions should wait until you're thinking clearly. I've never thought more clearly, I replied. This accident simply crystallized what I've known my entire life. I've never been your priority. I've never been important enough to show up for. Even a life-threatening emergency couldn't compete with Ashley's paint swatches. My mother began to cry, the tears looking suspiciously performative. How can you say that? We've always loved you both equally. Equally. I laughed, though it hurt my healing ribs. When have you ever treated us equally? When have you ever put my needs before hers? Name one time, Mom. Just one. Her silence was the only answer I needed. Ashley, never one to stay quiet when attention shifted away from her, knocked over the bedside water pitcher in an apparent accident that felt deliberately disruptive. As water spread across the floor, she made a show of trying to clean it up, succeeding only in disconnecting one of my monitor leads and triggering an alarm. Within seconds, my nurse rushed in, quickly assessed the situation, and silenced the alarm while reconnecting the lead. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the tense family tableau. Is everything all right, Ms. Winters? She asked me directly, ignoring my family entirely. Actually, I think my family was just leaving, I replied calmly. I'm feeling quite tired. We're not finished discussing this. My father insisted, his authoritarian tone falling flat in this environment where he held no power. The nurse straightened to her full height. Sir, my patient has indicated she needs rest. Hospital policy prioritizes patient recovery over visitor convenience. I can show you to the exit, or security can assist if necessary. My father, unused to having his authority challenged, puffed up momentarily before deflating under the nurse's unwavering gaze. My mother gathered her designer handbag, dabbing at eyes that had miraculously dried the moment attention shifted away from her. "We'll return tomorrow when you're more reasonable," she declared, as though my decision were a temporary mood rather than the result of decades of neglect. "I won't be here tomorrow," I informed them. "I'm being transferred to a rehabilitation facility in the morning to continue my recovery. The paperwork has already been handled by my medical proxy." This final evidence of decisions made without their input seemed to truly shock them. As they were ushered toward the door, my father turned back for one last attempt. "This isn't over, Katharina. We're still your parents." "Biologically, yes," I agreed. "But in every way that matters in terms of love, support, and trust, I've been an orphan for most of my life. The difference now is that I've finally accepted it." As they left Ashley trailing behind, still complaining about her interrupted paint job, a profound sense of peace settled over me. There was sadness too, of course, the natural grief of accepting that the loving family I had longed for as a child would never exist. But the relief of finally setting down that hope, of no longer expecting water from an empty well, far outweighed the sadness. Michael remained behind after my family's exit, his expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm better than I've been in years," I replied honestly. "Thank you for handling that so perfectly." He nodded, gathering his documents. "That's what you pay me for." Though I must admit, I took a certain professional satisfaction in delivering those particular documents. After Michael left, Zoe returned, having strategically waited for my family's departure. "How did it go?" "Exactly as expected," I said, suddenly exhausted but lighter somehow. "They didn't disappoint in their disappointment." She squeezed my hand gently. "I'm proud of you, you know. That couldn't have been easy." Actually, I reflected, it was easier than I expected. When you finally stop hoping for something you've never had, there's a kind of freedom in it. As I drifted towards sleep, the weight of expectations and obligation that had shadowed me for decades continued to lift, replaced by the certainty that I was finally truly charting my own course, without the anchor of family obligation dragging behind me. Recovery is a winding road with no shortcuts, as I discovered in the months following my accident. From the acute rehabilitation facility, where I spent 3 weeks relearning basic movements, to the home healthcare phase, where dedicated therapists visited Zoe's apartment where I was staying temporarily, each step forward required patience and persistence. Physical pain became a constant companion, a sharp reminder with every attempted step, a dull ache with each carefully executed exercise. The fractured femur required the most intensive rehabilitation with titanium rods and screws, now permanent residents in my leg. My punctured lung left me winded from even minimal exertion, while the abdominal surgeries limited my core strength and mobility. Yet physical recovery, challenging as it was, proved simpler than the emotional healing that unfolded in parallel. The clarity that had come to me in the hospital room remained, but implementing that boundary with my family required ongoing vigilance and strength. My parents predictably attempted to reassert their presence in my life once they understood the financial implications of my independence. Their approach evolved from angry demands to calculated guilt to theatrical apologies, each strategy transparent in its inauthenticity. First came the gifts delivered to the rehabilitation facility, expensive arrangements that arrived with cards expressing deepest concern and wishes for rapid healing. These were promptly donated to the facility's common areas for other patients to enjoy. Then came the daily voicemails, increasingly desperate in tone, insisting that families should stay together, especially during difficult times. "Katharina, this estrangement has gone on long enough." My father's message played one evening as Zoe and I shared dinner in her apartment. "Your mother is beside herself with worry. You need your family during recovery. Ashley has even offered to let you stay in her spare room when you're released." The very idea of recovering in Ashley's apartment subject to her whims and constant prioritization would have been laughable if it weren't so painfully tone-deaf. The spare room in question had previously been her yoga studio for the 3 weeks she maintained that particular interest. When gifts and guilt failed to produce results, they escalated to legal pressure. A certified letter arrived from their attorney, Bradford Wellington, suggesting that my medical condition had clearly impaired judgment and requesting a competency hearing regarding the recent changes to my legal arrangements. Michael handled this challenge with professional precision, providing comprehensive documentation of my mental clarity during the execution of all documents, complete with statements from medical professionals and independent witnesses. The threat dissolved quickly when confronted with this evidence, though not without a parting shot from Wellington, suggesting I would regret abandoning family obligations when older age arrived. Ashley took a different approach, vacillating between rage at being excluded from my will and sudden suspicious interest in my company's technology. She began sending links to articles about medical innovations, followed by suggestions that her creative perspective could benefit my marketing strategy. When these transparent attempts at establishing relevance failed, she resorted to publishing thinly veiled social media posts about ungrateful siblings and family betrayal. Throughout this period, therapy became my anchor. Dr. Sarah Patel helped me navigate the complex emotions of establishing boundaries with family. The guilt, the lingering hope for change, and the grief of accepting what would never be. Family estrangement isn't a failure, Dr. Patel assured me during one particularly difficult session when I questioned whether I was being unnecessarily harsh. It's sometimes the healthiest choice when the relationship consistently undermines your well-being. The cultural narrative that family trumps all can be deeply damaging when that family is toxic. We worked through exercises to recognize and counter the conditioned responses I'd developed over years of emotional neglect, the reflexive minimization of my own needs, the hypervigilance around others' emotions, and the constant striving for validation that would never come. You've spent your life trying to earn love that should have been freely given, she observed. The healing comes not from finally receiving that love, but from accepting that you deserved it all along, even without earning it. As my physical strength returned, so too did my professional focus. Initially working remotely from Zoe's apartment, I gradually re-engaged with my company, finding purpose in the work we were doing. The team had maintained operations admirably during my absence, with each department head stepping up to ensure continuity. 6 months after the accident, I was walking with only a slight limp, had regained most of my stamina, and had moved back into my own renovated apartment, now equipped with accessibility features I might need during flare-ups of pain. The physical scars were healing well, though the emotional landscape had been permanently altered. One unexpected outcome of my experience was a shifted perspective on my company's mission. While our diagnostic technology had always been aimed at improving medical outcomes, I now felt a personal connection to emergency medicine that transformed my approach. During a leadership retreat in early spring, I proposed a new initiative dedicated specifically to trauma care innovations. Our current diagnostic platforms have revolutionized early detection of chronic conditions, I explained to my executive team. But having experienced traumatic injury firsthand, I see an opportunity to bring that same innovation to emergency medicine. The response was unanimously enthusiastic, with several team members sharing their own experiences with emergency care for themselves or loved ones. Within weeks, we had established a dedicated research division focused on developing rapid diagnostic tools for trauma settings, with a particular emphasis on internal bleeding detection technology that could have accelerated my own treatment. Another meaningful change came through an unexpected connection. Nurse Darlene, whose kindness had been a lifeline during those early days in the ICU, had stayed in touch after my discharge. During one of our coffee meetings, she mentioned the challenges faced by patients without adequate support systems. The medical care is just one piece, she explained, stirring her latte thoughtfully. It's what happens after discharge that often determines recovery outcomes. Patients without family support face significant barriers to successful rehabilitation. Her insights sparked an idea that would become the Winters Recovery Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing practical and emotional support for patients navigating medical crises alone. Using a portion of my personal funds and company profits, we established programs ranging from transportation assistance to temporary housing and recovery companions. Darlene eventually joined the foundation as program director, bringing her frontline experience to shape services that addressed real needs rather than assumed ones. The work became deeply fulfilling for both of us, transforming my personal trauma into something that benefited others facing similar challenges. As for my family, the situation reached an unexpected turning point 9 months after the accident. My parents appeared unannounced at my office one afternoon, somehow charming their way past the receptionist by claiming a lunch appointment. They looked older than I remembered my father's confident posture, slightly diminished my mother's carefully maintained appearance showing signs of strain around the edges. "We need to talk," my father began without preamble when I entered the conference room where they'd been asked to wait. "This has gone on long enough." I remained standing, maintaining both physical distance and the psychological advantage of height. "I wasn't aware we had an appointment." "Would you have agreed to see us if we'd called?" My mother countered, her tone hovering between accusation and genuine question. "Probably not," I acknowledged honestly. Our last interaction made it clear we have fundamentally different understandings of family obligation. My father sighed heavily, appearing to deflate further. "We've been doing some thinking, Katharina, and some therapy," he added, clearly uncomfortable with the admission. "Your actions forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics." My skepticism must have shown on my face because my mother leaned forward, her expression more genuine than I'd seen in years. "We know we've favored Ashley. We didn't want to see it, but the evidence became impossible to ignore, especially after—" She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at my still visible physical recovery. "Especially after you realized I had significant assets you might lose access to," I suggested, unable to completely suppress the bitterness. "We deserve that," my father acknowledged, surprising me. "The timing of our concern does look suspiciously tied to learning about your financial success. I can't even blame you for thinking that's our primary motivation." "What is your primary motivation then?" I asked directly. They exchanged glances before my mother continued. "We're facing some difficulties, financial ones," she admitted with visible difficulty. "Ashley's latest business venture collapsed, and we've had to cover substantial debts. Your father's practice has been struggling with insurance changes, and my design clients have been cutting back in the economic downturn." "So you do want money," I concluded, reaching for my phone to call security. "No," my father said quickly, holding up his hands. "That's not why we're here. We're not asking for financial help. We're here because these challenges have forced us to reevaluate everything, including how we've treated you compared to Ashley. The therapist calls it pattern interruption," my mother added, the psychological terminology sounding strange in her voice. "When circumstances force you to see habits you've been blind to. Losing your financial support wasn't the interruption, Katharina. It was losing you and realizing it was our fault." I studied them carefully, searching for the manipulation I'd learned to expect, the subtle maneuvering towards some advantage. What I saw instead were two aging people confronting the consequences of decades of choices, looking genuinely uncomfortable with what they'd discovered. "What exactly are you hoping for from this conversation?" I asked finally. "A chance," my father replied simply. "Not to pretend the past didn't happen, but to see if there's any possibility of a different kind of relationship going forward. One with appropriate boundaries," he added, using the therapy language with the same awkwardness my mother had displayed. "And Ashley, where does she fit in this new vision?" My mother's expression tightened. "Ashley has her own journey. We've stopped enabling her financially, which has been challenging for everyone." She's actually working at a home improvement store in their paint department. The irony isn't lost on us. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the opening of a possibility where none had existed before. "I'm not making any promises," I said carefully. "And I have non-negotiable boundaries about my personal and professional life." "We understand." My father nodded, appearing genuinely relieved that I hadn't immediately dismissed them. "We're in therapy ourselves, trying to understand how we created this dynamic. It's not easy facing our failures as parents." "We'd like to start with occasional brief contacts," my mother suggested. "Perhaps a monthly lunch in public with clear start and end times." The structured approach, so different from their previous attempts to simply reinsert themselves into my life, suggested they might actually have done some genuine work on understanding appropriate boundaries. I considered their request, weighing the potential for continued disappointment against the possibility, however slim, of developing a healthier connection. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "And if I agree, it would be without Ashley present, at least initially." They nodded their acceptance of this condition, and after a few more minutes of awkward conversation they left without pushing for an immediate commitment, a restraint that itself indicated some level of change. Over the following weeks, I discussed this unexpected development extensively with Dr. Patel, examining my own motivations and expectations. "There's no right or wrong answer here," she assured me. "Maintaining distance is valid if that's what feels healthiest. Exploring a new, more bounded relationship is also valid if you're doing it with clear eyes." After careful consideration, I agreed to a trial period of limited contact monthly lunches with clear time boundaries, specific topics that were off limits, and the understanding that any attempt to violate these boundaries would result in immediate termination of the meeting. The first few encounters were strained conversation limited to neutral topics like books, films, and current events. Gradually, we established a new pattern of interaction, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation, with none of the old dynamics of guilt and emotional manipulation. It wasn't the warm, nurturing parent-child relationship I had longed for as a child, but it was something sustainable, something that didn't deplete me. As I approach the 1-year anniversary of the accident that changed everything, I find myself reflecting on the strange alchemy that transformed a near-death experience into a catalyst for profound life change. The physical scars are healing well, though certain movements still trigger twinges of pain. The emotional landscape has been permanently altered, not through miraculous healing of old wounds, but through the acceptance that some relationships can only be healthy with firm boundaries and limited expectations. My company continues to thrive with our trauma care innovations, attracting attention from major hospital systems nationwide. The Recovery Foundation has expanded to 3 cities, supporting hundreds of patients through the challenging transition from hospital to independent recovery. Zoe remains my closest friend, our bond strengthened through the crisis we weathered together. And perhaps most importantly, I've discovered a sense of peace I never thought possible, the freedom that comes from finally fully accepting my own worth, independent of family validation. What happened in that hospital room a year ago wasn't just about signing legal documents or removing my parents from my will. It was about removing the power they had held over my emotional well-being for decades. It was about recognizing that family should be defined by actions, not blood, about choosing connection with people who show up when it matters most. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your own experience, remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for healing. Have you ever had to create distance from family to protect your well-being? Share your experience in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in these difficult family journeys. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own path to setting healthy boundaries and honoring your true worth.